Okay, so there's no such thing as the middle ground in the world of competitive gaming. Terrible, good, offensively overpowered, they're just three descriptions that are necessary to summarize where an entire playable roster sits in the metagame. Pick anything other than the last option and you're knowingly handicapping yourself against an opponent who will always plump for what is best. But you know what? Some of these playable characters are so overpowered they are just, well, unfun to play against. And that is what we're here to talk about today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 overpowered characters that destroyed players online. Number 10, Bastion Overwatch. Now, any high ELO Overwatch player will roll their eyes at Bastion's presence here in this list, but you know what? He needed to make the cut. The OG robot from Blizzard's team shooter has traditionally been a solid pick throughout the game's lifecycle. Even though he's not the powerhouse he once was due to the power creep, the simple nature of his kit and the game plan in every level of play has proven to be both a boon and a detriment over the years. Namely, during the launch months of vanilla Overwatch, Bastion was everywhere thanks to his ability to prey on newbies. Now, game knowledge is the king in hero shooters, and if one has yet to learn how to counter a specific character, they will inevitably be dubbed overpowered. Now, what set him apart from, say, Symmetra, Reinhardt, or Hanzo, or any other member of the launch headcount was his ease of use. Everyone could play Bastion well, but countering him, well, that was a different story. Even now, if he has a coordinated team with him that is willing to play to his strengths, the automaton's ability to dominate through zone control is still unmatched. Number 9, Gil, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Now, if you boot up a copy of Third Strike's online edition and join a public lobby, I mean, any of them will do because they all actually stipulate one thing, and that is that Gil is banned. The red and blue bastard is always relegated to the bench, and for good reason. As the big bad of Street Fighter's third outing, Capcom never intended for the Technicolor leader of their Illuminati to be anything other than 100% busted. I mean, remember, this was during the days of the arcades. It was their goal to empty eager gamers' pockets, so final bosses were designed to be intentionally unfair. Listing off the character's strengths would turn into a laundry list real fast, so let's just say that based on his supers alone, Gil is unmatched amongst his peers. Unlike the rest of the roster, all three are accessible during a match and range from offensive abilities that deal chip damage greater than some unblocked finishers to built-in resurrections. And as you might expect from a resurrection super, it allows him to get back up and keep on fighting. We're well past the days where Third Strike was a mainstay of esports tournaments, but on the rare occasion that they are held, Gil is unsurprisingly banned from the get-go. Number 8, Cadin, League of Legends. Now, truth be told, League of Legends' longevity means that 90% of its roster has been considered beyond broken belief at some point in its ever-changing metagame. It's a testament to Riot ensuring every visitor to Summoner's Rift gets their time to shine, but there are some absolute edge cases where the studio just went overboard, Cadin being a prime example. Today, he's still an S-tier pick, but in 2009, where the available pool of characters was far smaller, the aptly named Voidwalker was an abject nightmare to go up against. Now granted, even when vitriol was being thrown Riot's way for releasing such a busted champion, early game Cadin was never an issue. Only when he reached level 6 and unlocked his ultimate would events begin to snowball, and it wasn't uncommon for anyone piloting him to carry a match on their lonesome, largely due to the disgusting damage that he'd dish out. TLDR, while once upon a time Cadin had few, if any, weaknesses, and remains one of the only veteran champions never requiring a rework to accommodate for power creep from newer releases. He was just that good. Number 7, Raina, Tekken 8. Yes, let's give one of Tekken 8's launch characters a repertoire that far exceed anyone else's. Fantastic idea, Bandai Namco. Bravo! Immature? Yes, quite possibly. But let's not forget that this is a series with pedigree. Anyone involved with the development of Tekken should know by now the difference between a mildly overtuned fighter and a godlike martial artist who can punish even something as slight as a misstep. Now, Raina ticks all of those boxes and then some. Now, arguably the worst crime, although some skilled players are going to get more mileage out of her just by being better, is her accessibility. Now, one would be forgiven for thinking that if everyone can abuse the best of the best, then there's going to be no disparity in skill online. Well, that's kind of true, but the knock-on effect of Raina's reign over the rest of the cast means that the entirety of Tekken 8's remaining roster is kind of invalidated as a result. Sure, there's nothing to stop folks from hiding her fists in private or custom lobbies, but anytime that ranked is contemplated, Raina is gonna come a-knocking. The inevitable patch to curb her prevalence can't come soon enough. Number 6, Android 16, Dragon Ball FighterZ Season 1. And no, I won't call it FighterZ. I just like calling it Fighters. Now, ironically, one of Dragon Ball Z's weakest characters actually ended up being the undisputed champion of Arc System Works' well-received spin-off. Now, Dragon Ball Fighter borrows iconic faces from the manga across its entire print run, but even the likes of Super Saiyan Blue Goku, Golden Frieza, and Beerus, which are, pseudo-gods and others literal deities, had nothing on Dr. Giro's Mohawked robot. The reason? Well, without going into too much fighting game jargon, the crux of the matter is this, that our big boy over here has little weaknesses and all of the strength. Now, it's befitting of his form-boosting outfit that 16 was initially the only character who had access to armored moves, i.e. he couldn't be interrupted or knocked off his feet, and could initiate combos from a full screen of distance from his opponent, and he happened to hit like a freight train to boot. Fortunately, the community would eventually complain loud enough to make Arc System nerf Android 16 after DBFZ's initial season, but he's still a solid pick even today. Number 5. Seer, Apex Legends Season 10. Now, developer-approved wall hacks in shooters are just as broken as the illegitimate kind. I mean, who knew, right? Well, Respawn definitely didn't, as it decided to ship a character with exactly that skill set back in Season 10 to disastrous results. All 3 core components of Ambush Artist's kit revolve around surveillance of the battlefield, chiefly of opponents and their location. And when you and your squad know what to expect at any given moment, the upper hand has already been provided. For an added layer of bullshittery, though, Seer could also tap into survey beacons lit around the map. Doing so would preemptively let your crew discern where the next ring location would settle, allowing for pretty brutal ambush plays. But the worst offense from all of this, though, is that Seer's game plan severely punished teams that were already fighting a losing battle. Matches would be won or lost depending on whether an enemy Seer had chosen you to be its prey. Respawn eventually reined in the overtuned hero, with last year's patch neutering his win rate for good. Number 4. Luke, Street Fighter V. Capcom conducted a little experiment with Street Fighter V in its dying days, with Luke, the future poster child for the series' 6th installment, who was introduced as the former's final DLC, offering as a teaser of sorts for his full-fledged debut 2 years later. Now, don't misinterpret that he was an unfinished prototype. If anything, the opposite was true. Capcom released the newcomer with a complete kit, but he was clearly designed with Street Fighter VI in mind, meaning that some of his quirks didn't translate well to an altogether mechanically different experience. Zoning is a key component of Street Fighter V, so when an individual with the uncanny ability to ignore tools intended to negate projectiles comes along, so too do heaps of problems. But then, that's the reoccurring problem with Luke. He can do what anyone who joins him in the ring can, but better. Superior damage, mobility, versatility, you name it, Luke does it best. And you know what Capcom's response to this was? Well, you know what? Street Fighter 6 is on the card, so rules go out the window. Balance? What's that? It's not as if fans had to wait another 2 years for that promised sequel to roll around, right? Oh wait, yes they did. Number 3. Landorus T, Pokemon. Now, Pokemon will never be balanced. It can't be. With over 1,000 mons to choose from, Game Freak balancing a competitive environment for every last one of them is, well, dare it be said, less feasible than cloning dinosaurs. Generally speaking, though, the studio does a bang-up job of not letting any individual critter catastrophically fracture Pokemon's fragile ecosystem. Well, that is with one exception. Hitting the scene in Gen 5's Black and White, Landorus T, and there is an important distinction to be made here because the base version is less of a threat, has, without hyperbole, been a staple of competitive teams ever since its debut due to several factors. The first and most foremost being that this Jin-themed force of nature is ground/flying. That makes him immune, resistant, or neutral to every other type bar 2. One of these is ice, a fantastically rarely used offensive type, and water. Now, to compensate for having an actual weakness, on paper at least, Landorus T is immune to all ground and electric type attacks, the latter of which is a key weakness of flying types that he can completely ignore. Combine all of the above with a monstrous attack stat, and it's little wonder why 4 generations later, Mr. T is still a menace. Number 2, Phoenix and Dark Phoenix, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, giving one character access to a toy that nobody else has is always bad. Capcom, despite being the masters of the fighting game genre, decided to throw caution to the wind and give exactly that to Phoenix in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Like Gil, Jean Grey's awakened form boasts the uncanny ability to resurrect under certain circumstances, though unlike Third Strike's gimmicky antagonist, Phoenix's return to life delivers much more than a second chance. Now granted, the feat isn't easy to pull off. Phoenix will only return to the arena as her dark variant if a hyper combo gauge is maxed before being toppled. Achieve these prerequisites, however, and her life bar will automatically refill. Every one of her attacks gets a power bump in this state, and the aforementioned gauge fills faster to boot. The caveat is that her health slowly drains over time, but even this can be offset by having her tag out with another member of your 3-person team to heal her wounds as any other fighter can. Capcom hit Jean Grey with numerous nerfs throughout MVC3's life cycle, though she still remains one of its strongest characters even now. And number 1, Oddjob, GoldenEye 007. Now, every 90s kid who owned an N64 is intimately familiar with Oddjob. By extension, those same people had a friend who would unrelentingly pick the henchman whenever a sesh of multiplayer was on the cards. The reasons for Goldfinger's right-hand man being a popular pick weren't lost on anyone. I mean, short stature made landing any hits, let alone headshots, borderline impossible. And this was back when online multiplayer was just an apple in the eye of gaming's big three. But then 2023 rolled around and the nightmare spread globally. Xbox owners were spared the torture, but everyone aiming to relive fond multiplayer memories on the Switch could do just that. And granted, the option amounted to little more than a short-lived novelty, but unsurprisingly, Oddjob proved as popular in the 21st century for the same reasons as he did in 1997. You don't have to take my word for it either. Even one of the shmups environmental artists, Carl Hilton, admitted that picking Oddjob is tantamount to cheating. He stated, "We all thought it was kind of cheating when we were playtesting with Oddjob, but it was too much fun to take out and there was no impetus from any of us to change it." Oh yes, fun, Carl. Real fun time playing against this. Real fun. Fantastic. Fun.